He was just a boy when his stepmother kicked him out, leaving him with what she called a worthless inheritance. But what he discovered inside that forgotten place would not only save his life, it would rewrite his entire past. If you've ever felt lost or been told you're not worth anything, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button because we're about to go on a journey together. The front door clicked shut behind me with a sound of finality, a clean metallic snap that severed the last thread connecting me to the life I'd known. It was my 18th birthday. Some people get a car, or a party, or at least a cake. I got an eviction notice delivered with a condescending smile. Sarah, my stepmother, stood on the other side of the glass, her arms crossed, watching me. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her expression was one of profound, cleansing relief, like someone who'd just taken out the trash after it had been sitting there for a week. I was the trash. In my left hand, I gripped the handle of a worn duffel bag containing everything I owned: 3 changes of clothes, a worn paperback, my phone, and a toothbrush. In my right, I held a large, stiff manila envelope. It was heavy. Earlier, she'd slapped it onto the polished granite countertop between us, the sound echoing in the cavernous, silent kitchen. "Your father's legacy," she'd said, her voice a low purr of contempt. "Happy birthday, Leo. You're a man now. You get to deal with his messes." I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. We'd been circling this day on the calendar for 2 years, ever since my dad died. 2 years of me being the ghost at her dinner table, the inconvenient reminder of a life she was trying to erase. 2 years of her reminding me, in 1,000 small ways, that my presence was temporary, a legal obligation she was counting down to the second. The truck. That was the only other thing. My dad's old Ford, a rust-pocked beast from the 90s that had been sitting in the side yard, covered in a tarp. She tossed the keys on top of the envelope. "It probably doesn't even run, but it's yours. Get it off my property." I stood on the manicured flagstone path, the cold March air biting at my cheeks. The sky was the color of dishwater. I could feel her eyes on my back as I walked toward the truck, my feet crunching on the pristine gravel driveway. Every step felt like I was wading through molasses. This was it. The great emancipation. Freedom. It felt a lot like being pushed off a cliff. I threw the duffel bag onto the passenger seat, the vinyl cracked and cold. The cab smelled of stale coffee, old oil, and something else. Something that was just Dad. A faint, lingering scent of sawdust and wintergreen. I closed my eyes for a second, a lump forming in my throat. I hadn't been in this truck since I was 15. He'd been teaching me to drive stick on an old country road, laughing every time I stalled it. The engine turned over on the 3rd try with a guttural roar, startling a flock of birds from the perfectly trimmed hedge. A small victory. As I pulled out of the driveway, I didn't look back. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I just drove, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, the big, clumsy envelope sitting on the seat beside me like an unwanted passenger. I had about $200 to my name, a full tank of gas she'd grudgingly paid for as a final, parting gift, and a legacy that my stepmother seemed to think was a cosmic joke. I drove for an hour, aimlessly, just putting distance between me and that house, that life. The suburbs bled into strip malls, then into the gray, anonymous sprawl of the highway. Finally, I pulled into the parking lot of a desolate-looking rest stop. The truck idled roughly, shaking a little, as if it were as uncertain as I was. I picked up the envelope. My name was written on the front in my dad's familiar, slightly messy script. Leo. Just that. For a moment, I couldn't bring myself to open it. It felt too final. My dad, Mark, was a carpenter, a builder, a man who could make anything out of wood. But he was a terrible businessman. That's what Sarah always said. "All heart, no head." she'd sneer after a few glasses of wine. After he died in the workplace accident, she'd discovered the mountain of debt he'd been hiding. A second mortgage on the house. Loans against his business. That's the story she told anyway. The story that allowed her to sell his workshop, his tools, everything, to keep her own comfortable life afloat while painting him as a fool. I was just a kid. I couldn't stop her. I just had to watch it all get dismantled. My fingers trembled as I tore the flap. Inside, there wasn't a letter. Not at first. Just a stack of documents held together with a thick rubber band. The top one was a deed. The heading read, Blackwood Sawmill, County of Aspen Ridge. I'd never heard of it. Below that was a property tax statement, bright red and stamped past due. The amount owed made my stomach clench. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more than 10 times what I had in my pocket. So this was the mess. A useless property I couldn't even afford to keep. Sarah was right. It was a joke. A cruel one. Tucked behind the tax notice was a small, tarnished brass key, attached to a faded paper tag with a single number printed on it. 7. And at the very bottom of the stack, there was a folded, crisp piece of paper. It wasn't a legal document. It was a map. A hand-drawn map of the sawmill property, with strange little X's and notes scribbled in the margins. My heart pounded a little faster. This wasn't just a pile of debt. This was something else. A puzzle. A final word from a man I thought I'd lost completely. Aspen Ridge. I pulled out my phone, my fingers numb with cold and anticipation. It was a 6-hour drive north, straight into the mountains, straight into the unknown. I put the truck in gear. I had nowhere else to go. The further north I drove, the more the world changed. The 4-lane highways shrank to 2, then to winding country roads that hugged the curves of the rising landscape. The manicured lawns and identical houses of my suburban prison gave way to sprawling farms, then dense forests of pine and fir. The air itself felt different, cleaner, laced with the sharp scent of cold earth and damp trees. Snow began to appear in shaded patches along the roadside, then as a thin, stubborn blanket across entire fields. The sky, which had been a uniform, depressing gray, began to break apart. Shafts of pale, watery sunlight speared through the clouds, illuminating the mountains ahead. They were giants, their peaks shrouded in mist, their slopes a dark, intimidating green. I felt impossibly small, a tiny speck in an old truck, driving toward a place I'd never seen, a place that apparently belonged to me, a place that was about to be taken away if I didn't do something. I stopped for gas in a small town called Pine Creek, about an hour out from Aspen Ridge according to my phone's spotty GPS. The gas station was old, with a single pump and a small, cluttered convenience store attached. An old man with a face like a road map and a greasy flannel jacket watched me fill the tank. "Heading up to the pass?" he asked, his voice raspy. "Storm's supposed to roll in tonight. Better have good tires." I glanced at the truck's tires. They were tires. That's all I knew. "I'm not going over the pass," I said. "I'm looking for a place near Aspen Ridge, a sawmill." The man's eyebrows shot up. He squinted at me, his gaze suddenly sharper. "Blackwood? You're going to the old Blackwood mill." I nodded. He was silent for a long moment, just looking from me to the old Ford. "That place has been shut up for years, ever since the accident." He knew my dad. The realization hit me like a physical blow. In all the time since his death, no one, not one person in Sarah's sterile world, had spoken his name with anything but pity or disdain. This stranger, this old man at a gas station, Said his name like it meant something, like he was a person. "He was my father," I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. The man's weathered face softened. "I'll be damned," he breathed. "You've got his eyes." He shook his head slowly. "A lot of folks around here miss your dad. He was a good man. Got himself into a bad spot is all." He looked up at the darkening sky. "You be careful up there, son. That mill. It's been waiting a long time." His words echoed in my head for the last hour of the drive. Been waiting a long time. It made the place sound less like a property and more like a slumbering beast. The road to Aspen Ridge was narrower still, a ribbon of cracked asphalt winding through dense, silent forest. The snow was thicker here, the trees heavy with it. The town itself was little more than a crossroads, a general store, a diner with a flickering neon sign, a post office, and a handful of houses. It was quiet, hunkered down, braced for the coming storm. My phone directed me onto a smaller, unpaved road just past the town limits. The sign was almost completely faded, but I could just make out the words, Blackwood Mill Road. The truck bounced and jostled over the frozen ruts, the suspension groaning in protest. The forest pressed in on both sides, the tall pines forming a dark, solemn corridor. And then, the trees opened up, and I saw it. The sawmill sat in a wide clearing, a collection of sprawling, interconnected buildings under a heavy blanket of snow. It was massive, far bigger than I'd imagined. A huge, skeletal main building with a high, peaked roof, a series of lower sheds and workshops, and a towering metal chimney that stood stark against the gray sky like a tombstone. It was a giant, sleeping dragon made of rust and rotting wood. Sarah's words came back to me. A pile of rotting wood and debt. From here, she wasn't wrong. It looked dead, abandoned, worthless. My heart sank. What was I doing here? This was a mistake, a fool's errand. I was chasing a ghost, led on by a hand-drawn map and a cryptic key. I should have just sold the deed to a scrap dealer for a few $100 and taken a bus somewhere warm. I parked the truck near what looked like a small, detached office building, the only structure that didn't seem to be actively collapsing. The snow was almost a foot deep, my boots sinking with a soft crunch. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sighing of the wind through the pines and the faint creak of metal from the main building. It was the kind of profound quiet that feels loud, that presses in on you. I was completely and utterly alone. I took the small brass key from my pocket. The tag read 7. I looked at the office door. It was solid oak, reinforced with iron straps, and it had a heavy-duty lock. It looked far more secure than any other part of the complex. I slid the key into the lock. It resisted for a second, then turned with a loud, grating click that seemed to echo across the entire valley. I pushed the door open. A wave of cold, stale air washed over me, smelling of dust, decaying paper, and something else, that faint, familiar scent of wintergreen. My father's office. I stepped inside, out of the wind, and into the past. The office was a time capsule. A thick layer of dust covered everything, turning the room into a landscape of soft grays. A large wooden desk sat facing the door, a high-backed leather chair behind it. On the desk was an old rotary phone, a neat stack of papers weighted down by a rock, and a heavy, dark green metal lockbox. My eyes fixed on the box. It was squat, solid, and had a combination dial on the front. No keyhole. Shelves lined one wall, filled with ledgers and binders, all coated in the same uniform layer of dust. On another wall hung a large, framed photograph of the mill in its prime. It was bustling with activity, logs stacked high, smoke billowing cheerfully from the chimney, men swarming over the machinery. It was alive. So different from the silent ruin outside. A calendar was pinned to a corkboard, frozen on a single month. October, 2 years ago. The day he died was circled in red. I ran my finger over the dusty surface of the desk, leaving a clean streak. It felt like trespassing on sacred ground. This was his space, his sanctuary, the place where he'd fought his battles, hidden his secrets. My gaze kept returning to the lockbox. What was inside? Money? More debt? A confession? I tried the handle, but it was locked tight. The combination dial stared back at me, a silent challenge. I looked around the room for any clue, any sequence of numbers. Nothing. Just the dust and the silence and the ghost of my father. My eyes fell on the hand-drawn map I'd taken from the envelope. I unfolded it on the desk, the paper crinkling loudly in the quiet room. It was a detailed layout of the entire property, the main mill, the drying sheds, the log pond. But there were markings on it that didn't correspond to buildings, little X's. One was right in the middle of the main sawing floor. Next to it, my dad had written a single word: crowbar. It was a start. It was more than a start. It was an instruction. I left the quiet solitude of the office and stepped back out into the biting wind. The main mill building loomed before me, its vast, dark doorway like the mouth of a cave. The snow had started to fall, small, hard flakes that stung my face. The storm was coming. Whatever I was going to find, I had to find it soon. I pulled the heavy sliding door open just enough to slip through. Inside, the scale of the place was staggering. It was a cathedral of industry, now fallen into decay. Giant circular saws, rusted and silent, stood like altars. Conveyor belts and rollers snaked through the cavernous space, disappearing into the gloom. Light filtered in through high, grimy windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the frigid air. The smell was thick with the scent of old wood, grease, and rust. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. Using the map and the dim light from my phone, I found the spot. A section of the heavy plank floor, right in the heart of the mill. One of the planks had a small, barely visible notch carved into its edge, just like on the map. There was no crowbar in sight. Of course not. That would be too easy. I got on my hands and knees, the cold from the wood seeping through my jeans. I ran my fingers along the edges of the plank, searching for a way to get it up. My fingers found a small hole, drilled into the side. A finger hold. I pulled. It was heavy, but it lifted. Beneath it was a small, hidden cavity, just a few feet deep. And inside, lying on a bed of rotting canvas, was a rusted crowbar and another manila envelope, this one sealed with wax. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. This was the next step. I grabbed the envelope and the crowbar and scrambled back to the relative shelter of the office. I sat down in my father's dusty chair, the leather cracking in protest. The wind howled outside, rattling the window frames. The snow was coming down harder now, a thick, swirling curtain of white. I was sealed in, a prisoner in this forgotten place. But I finally had a key. Not the brass one for the door, but a real one. I broke the wax seal on the envelope and pulled out a single, folded sheet of paper. It was a letter. In my father's handwriting. "Leo," it began. "If you are reading this, it means two things. First, that I am gone. And second, that you were smart enough to find your way here. I'm proud of you, son. But I'm sorry. I am so sorry for what I have to tell you." I took a deep breath, my hands shaking. I read on. "The accident," he wrote, "was not an accident. It was a lie. A story I had to create to protect you." The words blurred. I had to read them 3 times before they sank in. Not an accident. A lie. My whole world, the foundation of my grief for the past 2 years, crumbled in that single sentence. I got into business with the wrong people, Leo.
A development company from the city. They don't build things, they devour them. They wanted this land, not for the timber, but for the water rights, for the access to the mountain. They offered to buy me out. I said no. This mill has been in our family for 3 generations. It's more than a business. It's our home.
So they tried to force me out. They buried me in legal fees, cut off my suppliers, threatened my customers. When that didn't work, they got uglier. They started threatening you. The letter shook in my hand. He'd never told me. I'd just seen the stress on his face, the long nights he spent poring over papers at the kitchen table. I thought it was just money. They made it clear they would hurt you to get to me, the letter continued. I saw no other way out. I couldn't go to the police. They had people on their payroll. So I created a story. The story of a desperate man, buried in debt, who gets careless at his own mill. I staged the accident. I made it look convincing. And then I disappeared. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, leaving you. But it was the only way I knew to keep you safe. I left you with Sarah because I knew she would never look for me. She was happy to believe the story, to take the insurance money and wash her hands of my mess. I knew she would care for you, at least until you were 18. It was a cold comfort, but it was all I had. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot tracks on my cold skin. Not tears of grief, but of something else. A profound, aching mixture of anger and a love so fierce it hurt. He hadn't abandoned me. He hadn't been a fool who'd fallen into debt. He had sacrificed everything. His name, his life, his son, all to protect me. The letter ended with one final paragraph. This place, the mill, is your birthright, Leo, but it's also a target. As long as it's in our name, they'll be watching. The lockbox on my desk contains everything you need to know. The combination is the day you were born. Your day. The day my life truly began. Inside, you will find a choice. You are a man now, and the choice must be yours. Be careful, son. I love you. The day I was born. My birthday. The day she kicked me out. The irony was so thick and bitter, I could taste it. I looked at the lockbox. It was no longer just a metal container. It was a testament, a final message in a bottle. I wiped my face with the sleeve of my jacket and walked over to the desk. The numbers on the dial felt heavy, significant. Month, day, year. I turned the dial slowly, deliberately, the clicks echoing in the silent room. Right. Left. Right. The final number clicked into place. I pulled the handle. The lock disengaged with a solid, satisfying thud. The box was open. Before I tell you what I found inside that box, I need to pause. Because maybe you're in a place like this right now. Maybe you've been told a story about your life, about your family, that doesn't feel right. Maybe you're carrying a weight that someone else put on you, a legacy of what you've been told is failure or shame. If you've made it this far into my story, it's probably because some part of it feels familiar. This channel, this community we're building, it's for people like us. People who know that the easy story is never the whole story. So if this is hitting you, I want you to take a second and just breathe. And I want you to consider subscribing, because I'm going to keep telling stories like this. Real stories about finding the truth, about fighting back, about what it means to build a home when you feel homeless. Your story matters, and I promise you, you're not alone in this. Now, let's get back to that office, with the storm howling outside and a box full of secrets sitting open on the desk. My heart was a trip hammer in my chest. For a moment, I just stared at the open lockbox, afraid of what it held. It was one thing to read a letter, to have the story of the past 2 years rewritten. It was another to see the proof, the responsibility, the choice my father had mentioned. The top layer was cash, stacks of $100 bills, neatly bundled. More money than I had ever seen in my life. Enough to disappear. Enough to start over. Anywhere. I could take it, walk away from the decaying mill, the tax debt, the looming threat of a faceless corporation, and never look back. I could buy a new car, a new life, and leave Leo, the ghost of Sarah's house, behind for good. It was a powerful temptation, the easy way out. But beneath the cash, there was something else. A series of small cassette tapes, each labeled with a date and a name. Ledgers, but not the dusty ones on the shelves. These were small, pocket-sized notebooks filled with my father's cramped handwriting, detailing payments, meetings, and conversations. And there were documents, copies of contracts, bank transfers, and internal memos. This wasn't just a stash of emergency cash. This was evidence. This was the war room. At the very bottom of the box, sealed in a plastic sleeve to protect it from moisture, was one last letter. My hands were steadier now. The shock was turning into a cold, hard resolve. I pulled it out and read. Leo, it started. If you've gotten past the money, then you have a stronger heart than I even hoped. I'm guessing you figured it out by now. This is the truth. Everything they did, everything they threatened, it's all here. The tapes are my recorded phone calls with their chief negotiator, a man named Henderson. The ledgers track the bribes they paid to local officials. The documents prove they've been illegally dumping industrial waste on properties they acquire up here, poisoning the watershed. It's why they need this land so badly, to control the whole valley and bury their crimes forever. My blood ran cold. This was so much bigger than one sawmill. They were killing the land. The land my family had cared for over generations. So here is your choice, son, the letter went on. The money is yours. No one will ever know. Take it and build a good life for yourself. You've earned it. Forget this place. Forget me. Survive. There is no shame in that choice. I want you to be happy and safe above all else. That's the first path. He paused on the page, and I could almost hear his voice, the careful, deliberate way he spoke when he was explaining something important. But there is a second path, a harder path. This evidence in the right hands could stop them. It could save this valley. It could clear my name. But it will put you in their crosshairs. They will not play fair. They will try to crush you, just as they tried to crush me. It is a dangerous fight. On this piece of paper, below my signature, is a name and a number. His name is Arthur Albright. He was my lawyer and my friend. He knows everything. He has the other half of this evidence waiting in a safe deposit box. He has been waiting for your call. If you choose the second path, call him. He will guide you. But once you make that call, there is no turning back. The choice is yours alone. I will not be there to help you. You have to decide what kind of man you want to be. Whatever you choose, know that I love you and I am proud of you, Dad. I stared at the name, Arthur Albright, and a phone number. The choice. Run and live, or stay and fight, for a dead man's honor, for a dying valley, for a pile of rotting wood that was suddenly the most important place on earth. Was I the kind of man who could do that? I looked around the dusty office, at the picture of the mill in its prime. I thought of the old man at the gas station. A lot of folks around here miss your dad. I thought of the scent of sawdust in the old truck, the feeling of my father's hand on my shoulder. This wasn't just about land or money. It was about a story. Their story was that my father was a failure, a deadbeat who ran from his debts. My story, the true story, was that he was a hero who had sacrificed himself to save his son and his home. Which story was going to win? There was no real choice. There was only one path. I pulled out my phone. The storm was raging outside, but I had a single bar of service. My fingers were stiff with cold as I dialed the number. It rang 3 times, each ring a tolling bell marking the end of my old life. Albright, a calm, steady voice answered. Mr. Albright, I said, my own voice cracking slightly. My name is Leo. My father was Mark. He told me to call you. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, then a soft exhale. Leo, the man said, and his voice was filled with a profound, weary relief. My God, son, I've been waiting for this call for 2 years. The conversation with Arthur Albright was like finding a light in a pitch-black tunnel. His voice was calm, pragmatic, and radiated a quiet confidence that settled my frayed nerves. He didn't waste time with sentiment. He confirmed everything. The development company, a corporate predator named Sterling Terra Group. The man on the tapes, Julian Henderson, their ruthless head of acquisitions. The poisoned land. He filled in the gaps, explaining how my father had come to him a month before he died, laying out the whole desperate plan. Arthur had tried to talk him out of it, to find a legal path, but my dad was convinced that disappearing was the only way to take the target off my back. He made me promise 2 things, Leo, Arthur said, his voice firm over the crackling line. First, that I would hold my copies of the evidence and not act until you contacted me. He insisted the choice had to be yours. He didn't want to trap you in his war. Second, he made me promise that if you did call, I would help you with every resource at my disposal. He paused. Your father was the most honorable man I've ever known. He was not a fool. He was a lion protecting his cub. I will be proud to help you finish this fight. We talked for an hour. He laid out the strategy. The first step was to stop the foreclosure. The back taxes were the lever Sterling Terra was using to try and get the county to seize the property and sell it at auction, where they could snap it up for pennies on the dollar. The money in that box, Arthur said. Your father left it for this. It's not just for you to run. It's battle funds. Tomorrow morning, I want you to take the cash, go to the Aspen Ridge County office and pay those taxes. In full. Get a receipt. That takes their easiest weapon away from them. It shows we're not rolling over. The next steps would be harder. Filing a lawsuit, submitting the evidence to the state's Environmental Protection Agency, going to the press. It would be a long, ugly slog. They will come after you, Leo, Arthur warned, his voice grim. They'll try to discredit you. They'll dig for any dirt they can find. They'll try to paint you as a disgruntled, greedy kid trying to extort them. You have to be ready for that. Was I ready? A day ago, I was a scared, heartbroken teenager with $200 and a duffel bag. Now I was the key player in a high-stakes fight against a corrupt corporation. But the fear was mixed with something else now. Purpose. I had a mission. I had a name to clear. I had a home to save. The storm broke before dawn. I woke up stiff and cold in my father's chair, the world outside transformed. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, and the fresh snow covered everything in a thick, pristine blanket of white. The air was so clean and cold, it felt like a new beginning. The mill, which had looked so decrepit and sad the day before, now looked majestic, its sharp angles softened by the snow, sparkling in the morning sun. I followed Arthur's instructions to the letter. I counted out the exact amount for the taxes, plus the penalties. It was a thick wad of cash. I found a small, local bank in town and got a cashier's check, not wanting to walk into a government office with a bag full of hundreds. The woman at the county clerk's office was surprised. The Blackwood property? She said, peering at me over her glasses. We were about to start seizure proceedings on that next week. She stamped my receipt with a satisfying thud. Paid in full. It felt like the first real victory. On my way out of town, I stopped at the general store.
The man behind the counter was the gruff mechanic from the gas station, the one who'd warned me about the storm. He recognized me immediately. "You're Mark's boy," he said. It wasn't a question. "Heard you were in town. Paid the taxes on the mill, too. Word gets around fast here." I nodded, bracing for suspicion. Instead, he broke into a slow grin. "Good," he said. "Damn good. Your dad loved that place. A lot of us were sorry to see it go." He leaned forward. "Anything you need, kid. Tools, a generator, a hot meal.
You come see me. Name's Gus." That small offer of help, that simple sign of community, felt more valuable than all the money in the lockbox. I wasn't alone in this valley. The next few months were the hardest and most rewarding of my life. The legal battle began, a slow grind of paperwork and preliminary hearings. Arthur was a master, filing motions, injunctions, and discovery requests that had Sterling Terra's high-priced lawyers scrambling. As he'd predicted, they came after me. A slick reporter from a city paper showed up, asking leading questions. Anonymous comments appeared on online articles, calling me a liar and an opportunist. Sarah even got involved, giving a tearful interview about how her troubled stepson was dishonoring his father's memory with these delusional fantasies. It hurt, but it was different now. Their words couldn't touch the truth I now carried. While Arthur fought in the courtroom, I fought at the mill. I used the money from the box, not to live high, but to bring the place back to life. I bought a new generator from Gus, and for the first time in 2 years, the office had light and heat. I spent my days cleaning. I shoveled snow. I swept away the shroud of dust and decay. I repaired the leaking roof over the office. I sorted through my father's old tools, cleaning the rust from them, feeling the worn wooden handles he had shaped with his own hands. Every board I replaced, every window I cleaned, felt like an act of defiance. I wasn't just cleaning a property, I was reclaiming a legacy. I was making it a home. I started to learn the rhythms of the valley, the way the light changed on the mountains, the smell of the air before snow, the names of the people at the diner. They were wary at first, but when they saw I was staying, that I was working, they slowly opened up. They told me stories about my dad, about my grandfather. They taught me things. How to properly stack firewood. How to read the weather. How to fix the old Ford's carburetor. I was becoming part of the place, my roots slowly sinking into the rocky soil. One evening, Arthur called. "We got them, Leo," he said, and for the first time, I heard pure, unadulterated triumph in his voice. "The state EPA tested the sites we gave them. The soil and water samples are off the charts toxic. It matches the chemical profile from the documents your father collected. Sterling Terra's board is in full-blown panic." It wasn't the end, but it was the turning point. The story was no longer about me, the disgruntled kid. It was about a corporation poisoning a valley. The press narrative shifted. The state attorney general announced a formal investigation. Henderson, the man on the tapes, was fired in a public spectacle. They were trying to cut their losses, to sacrifice him to save the company. But the damage was done. The truth was out. The lawsuit was still ongoing, but their leverage was gone. The mill was safe. The valley was safe. My father's name was cleared. He wasn't a deadbeat. He was a whistleblower. A hero. The local paper ran a front-page story with the headline, "Local Man's Secret Battle Saves Aspen Valley." They used an old photo of my dad, smiling, leaning against a stack of freshly cut lumber at the mill. I cried when I saw it. I cried for the years I'd believed the lie. I cried for the father I had lost twice, and now, in a way, had found again. I cried for the scared kid who had stood on a manicured lawn with a duffel bag, and for the man he was becoming. I've been here for a year now. The lawsuit ended in a settlement.
Sterling Terra paid a massive fine to the state for the environmental damage and established a cleanup fund. They also paid a private settlement for the harassment and damages against my father's estate. It was a lot of money. But the money doesn't feel like the prize. It's just a tool, a way to finish what I started. I haven't reopened the Sawmill as a business.
Not yet. Maybe one day. For now, I'm just living here. I've used the settlement to restore the place properly, not just the office, but the main building. The machinery is cleaned and oiled, silent but ready. The buildings are repaired, the roofs are sound, the windows are clean. It's not a ruin anymore. It's a monument. It's my home. I often sit in the office in the evenings, in my father's chair, and look out the window at the mountains. I think about inheritance. When Sarah threw that envelope at me, she thought she was giving me a burden, a pile of worthless wood and debt. She thought inheritance was about money, about property, about things you could liquidate. But she was wrong. My father's real legacy wasn't the mill. It was the choice he gave me. The choice to run or to fight. The choice to accept a story someone else wrote for me, or the choice to find the truth and write my own. He didn't leave me a property. He left me a purpose. He didn't leave me a pile of rotting wood. He left me a home, a community, and the chance to become the man he always knew I could be. The greatest inheritance isn't something you're given, it's something you choose to build. And that's the story. It's not a fairy tale. The scars are still there. My father is still gone. But the story has a new ending, an ending I chose, an ending I built with my own 2 hands, right here in the heart of the mountains. And that brings me back to you. What story are you living right now? Is it one you chose or one that was given to you? Maybe the thing you think is a worthless burden in your life, a difficult past, a family secret, a painful memory, is actually your own version of the Blackwood sawmill. Maybe it's not a ruin. Maybe it's a foundation. Maybe it's the place where you'll find your strength, your purpose, your home. I want you to think about that, and I want you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me about an inheritance you received that wasn't about money. Tell me about a time you chose the harder path. I read every comment because this is more than just a channel. It's a community of people who understand that the most valuable things in life are the ones we have to fight for. If this story meant something to you, please subscribe and join us, because every single one of us has a story worth telling, a truth worth fighting for, and a home worth building. Thank you for listening.